You ever have one of those moments in life where you lose something and you realize that maybe you didn't know how good you had it, but now that you don't have it anymore, you kind of appreciate that thing even more than you initially did? That's kinda how I felt with Storm Collectibles' Mortal Kombat action figure line. And I say kinda because, this wasn't one of those instances where you don't know what you got till it's gone, not a situation like that. No, I knew exactly what I had very early on, and as soon as I got a few figures very early on in the line, I kinda knew right away that this was gonna become one of my favorite lines to collect. The detailed characters, the great articulation and posability, all the accessories to display your figures doing their signature moves and fatalities to the other characters. It was a great line. Not a perfect line, as we'll see, but it's hard for me to be mad about it because every release gave me something to be really happy about. At least, they used to. Sometime in early 2024, it became apparent that Storm Collectibles was not going to be making any more Mortal Kombat figures. And that, to me, was heartbreaking. What went wrong? What happened? We had so many figures that were supposed to come out. What's going to happen to those? We got no word from Storm Collectibles on any of this. What's the deal? So as a fan of the line, all those unanswered questions was kind of annoying, but that's kind of been the relationship that people have had with Storm Collectibles the entire time. See, Storm Collectibles always kept us guessing. You never knew when a new character was going to go up for pre-order, and sometimes you'd have no idea the figure was even coming. I'm willing to admit that Storm didn't exactly handle their release schedule great over the years. Some characters would be displayed at a show and then you'd see them for pre-order a month later. Other characters would have prototypes made and displayed only to never see the light of day. And I gotta tell you, that disappoints me. Years of having the license and not one single game roster completed. Every time I walk past the shelves, I see a lot of awesome figures, but I also just see holes in the collection. So many A-list characters that we just never got. It's sad to admit that unless something happens where Storm gets to pick up where they left off, we probably never will get these characters. And that's what I want to talk about today, the life and death of Storm Collectibles' Mortal Kombat line. So let's take it way back. I want to say it was 2015 that I first heard of Storm Collectibles doing a Mortal Kombat classic action figure line. Now, I knew nothing about Storm Collectibles at this time. I had been familiar with a little bit of their stuff from YouTube reviews and things of their 1/6 scale figures, so Mike Tyson, Hulk Hogan, figures like that are the 12-inch figures. I didn't know if they were doing anything smaller scale prior to Mortal Kombat. This might have been their first run at that scale. I'm not 100% sure. I did know it was classic Mortal Kombat, so I was willing to give it a shot. I've been waiting for figures like these for I don't know how many years, and we're finally now about to get them. Now, it took a while, but you did eventually start seeing figures release in 2017, and the first one, of course, was Scorpion. This was billed as a 1/12 scale figure, but it was plain to see that these were clearly much larger scale, putting them similar to something closer to what NECA was doing, or McFarlane. Not that that's a bad thing at all, it's just that it raised a few eyebrows when it hit the market. Looking at the figure itself, you could see a ton of differences between the earlier prototype and the final product. Some details got changed up, and lots of articulation was added. I pretty much instantly loved this figure, and was thrilled to add Sub-Zero to my collection not long after. So at the time, it seemed like Storm Collectibles was off to a pretty solid start. You have kind of the two most recognizable faces of Mortal Kombat hitting the ground running with the first two figures released, and they look like they stepped right out of Mortal Kombat 2 from 1993. They even included separate cloth-style masks that you could swap onto the figures if you wanted to make them look more like their Mortal Kombat 1 versions. Not the recent Mortal Kombat 1, I'm talking about this Mortal Kombat 1. And I kind of hate that we're going to need to clarify that for the rest of our lives, but I digress. It was kind of a genius move, really, starting out with Scorpion, because that meant that Storm Collectibles essentially could make all of the palette swap ninjas based on that one body mold and not really spend a lot of money on too much production. You have the mold, just keep doing it in different colors. Add some different accessories here and there, and all of a sudden you've got your roster off to a great start, and you could use the profits from those repaints to get brand new characters off and running. And let me tell you, they got their money's worth out of that first ninja mold. This Scorpion figure was reused for 14 different releases. You got 7 different ninja characters, plus each of them had a bloody, battle-damaged variant. Storm Collectibles got great use out of this mold, but after the release of Reptile and the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Noob Saibot, it left people guessing. Are we ever going to see any non-ninja characters? Our questions would be answered to some extent later in 2017, where we would see prototypes for a bunch of brand new figures. We had Liu Kang, we had Baraka, we had Scorpion from Mortal Kombat X with a brand new mold, and then we had Kitana and one of the cyborg ninjas, but more on these guys later. Going back to the beginning, with those early original prototypes, they showed Goro along with Scorpion and Sub-Zero, and he looked gigantic and very imposing. That figure eventually came out in 2018, toward the end of the year. Storm had definitely stepped their game up, and everything about Goro was a home run. Well, almost everything. His ankles were notoriously useless. From the knees up, the figure is still essentially perfect. 2018 also gave us the big dad of the original series, with Shao Kahn. I remember seeing him at New York Comic Con 2016, and I was blown away when I eventually got him in hand. This figure had the throne from Mortal Kombat 2, along with his gigantic hammer and all of his different hands for the various gestures he'd make in the games when he was taunting his opponents. This figure still remains one of the standouts in the Mortal Kombat collection. Two brand new figures depicting longtime villains of the series that are fan-favorite characters in their own right, plus 3 Comic-Con exclusives, that being the last 3 palette swap ninjas that we needed, Ermac, Rain, and Smoke. I will admit, at the time, it did seem a little odd. I mean, we were getting 3 Comic-Con exclusive figures, but only 2 standard releases? Struck me as a little bit unusual, like we're getting more con stuff than we are just regular releases. That's odd. Around this time is when people started noticing that Storm Collectibles was branching off into a bunch of different directions. You know, they had a bunch of different licenses for other fighting games. At this point, their Street Fighter line had been going strong for about the same amount of time as the Mortal Kombat line. Plus, we had started to see them branch into different directions. They were doing some pro wrestling, they were doing some other video game stuff. So a lot of collectors started thinking maybe they're stretching themselves too thin. Like, they're not paying attention to one license at a time, they're just going all over the place. And that's why the releases started getting a little bit more and more sporadic. And the ones that did come out, you started to see, well, they're mostly repaints. And this would kind of haunt Storm Collectibles for the entire rest of their Mortal Kombat run. That and something else that always kind of bugged me. Rain and Ermac were repaints of the Mortal Kombat 2 body mold. Problem is, these guys didn't show up until Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, so they should have been done on that style of ninja body, not on the older versions. But I could let that slide. You know, I'm just happy that we're expanding our roster, we do see that there's new characters coming, and besides, they don't even make the Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 style ninja bodies, so I'm not mad at it. Right, so they couldn't have waited like 1 year and just given us an accurate Rain and Ermac? Whatever. Let's move on. So here's where things get a little interesting. Early 2019, we got a teaser for a brand new Scorpion figure, this time based on Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Now, if you were around back in the 90s, you would remember that Mortal Kombat 3 initially didn't have any of those ninjas in the game except for Sub-Zero and Smoke, who looked completely different. Noob Saibot was also in the game, but he wasn't a palette swap of the ninjas because, like I said, the ninjas weren't in the game. He was a palette swap to Kano at this point. Well, eventually they would release Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, which included a bunch of the characters that were left out of the regular Mortal Kombat 3, which brought back all of those ninjas in a brand new ninja costume. And this also included a brand new version of Human Smoke and a brand new version of Classic Sub-Zero, as well as restoring Noob Saibot to the ninja body. But that whole ordeal, that's a whole nother video. I'm not here to talk about all that. If you want to learn about the history of Mortal Kombat, check out my friend Ian over at 616 Entertainment. He'll hook you up.
You can say that again.
Getting back to the toys, 2019 would also give us Baraka from Mortal Kombat 2. This figure did have a prototype shown with a bunch of other characters, so we felt pretty good about the fact that he'd definitely be made. After all, why would a prototype character not get a final product? Baraka was very promising. You know, we saw the prototype some years ago, and now we got the brand new figure in hand, all new tooling, whole new mold, and everything about it really genuinely quite nice. And we also knew that the Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Scorpion was coming, which meant that they were probably going to get around to doing new versions of all those palette swap ninjas. Which was great for new collectors who were finding their way into the line because those previous ninja figures had started getting really expensive on the aftermarket, so yeah, we needed new versions, definitely. Now, if you recall back when we saw the initial Baraka prototype, they also showed the Lin Kuei Cyborg, and we started getting those characters at the end of 2019 as well. Cyrax and Smoke came first, with Cyrax being a regular release and Smoke being a New York Comic Con exclusive. These figures were beautiful. Storm had improved the quality once again. The paint and accessories were sharp, and the articulation, once again, was stellar. It was great seeing all these guys come out so close together. Storm continued to showcase their ability to use a body mold to its fullest potential and get the most variety possible from it. It made me very confident that whenever that Katana prototype was finished, we'd see Melina and Jade very soon thereafter. As for the Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Scorpion, well, it didn't impress me in the same way as the original one did. Might just be because I prefer the older style ninja costumes, but I also think it's because they beefed up his proportions to a huge degree. I will say, though, that the engineering had been greatly improved this time. Gone were the ball-jointed hips that would always get loose, and instead, we got much nicer joints that would hold up better over time. I'm thankful that they went in this direction because my original Scorpion can barely even stand at this point. So around this time, the variant figures started changing a little bit too. We'd stop seeing so many of the bloody ones, and we would start seeing more things like the Big Bad Toy Store exclusives, which basically meant that the figures themselves were going to be essentially the same, but there'd be maybe one or two minor differences. So for example, Scorpion from Ultimate MK3, the head had the skull underneath the mask, so it was like a character select screen version of Scorpion. Cyrax and Sector came with a couple of extra accessories, but other than that, they were basically all the same figures. So we're 3 years into the life of the line at this point, and maybe you're starting to realize it seems like there's something missing, or rather someone missing. Now why don't you have a guess, because you could probably notice right now that we don't have any of the actual main characters of Mortal Kombat. Now earlier I did mention that Sub-Zero and Scorpion were probably the most recognizable characters in Mortal Kombat, but they're not really the main characters if you know the story. So if you can recall back to like the movie or the cartoons or like any of the comics that you might have been reading, those main characters in the series are Liu Kang, Sonya Blade, Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Raiden, Sonya Blade, and characters like that. And apart from seeing a Liu Kang prototype shown pretty early on in the life of the line, there's really no sign of any of those figures coming out. I will say that Daniel Pesina did post a teaser of a potential Storm Collectibles Johnny Cage in 2019. More on that later. So at least we've seen some indication that Liu Kang and Johnny Cage are coming. We just don't know when. Maybe that would change in 2020. Spoiler alert, it kinda changed. We did get one new character, that being Raiden. Two versions, to be fair, since the San Diego Comic-Con one had the Player 2 red costume. But one of the other figures released that year was the Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 Sub-Zero, which reused the new Scorpion body. This time, the color was much nicer than the original Sub-Zero, whose color I always felt was a bit too dark. The brighter blue was great, and there was even a Big Bad Toy Store exclusive version with the iced-up Cryomancer arms. The other Comic-Con exclusive this year was a brand new version of the classic Scorpion design. New engineering applied to the original design from the first figure in the line. This was a great upgrade, although there were a few body proportion things that didn't exactly land with me. I still enjoyed the figure. If we're being specific, this isn't technically a new MK2 Scorpion. This is actually based on the classic Scorpion skin from Mortal Kombat 11, right down to the tassels around his waist. So around this time, I started getting maybe a little concerned. I mean, we finished the lineup of palette swap ninjas in the original mold, the first style of ninja mold. And now they're going to the Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 style mold and starting to expand that roster of palette swap ninjas, which is fine. But now we've also got a third separate mold that's done in the similar style to the first mold, where it's the classic look, and are they gonna go in 3 different directions with these palette swap ninjas? Like, seems a little convoluted, especially when you consider that we really only got one new character in 2020, because I mean the other ones were just versions of Scorpion and Sub-Zero, which were the first 2 characters ever released in the line, so there's really not much getting added to our roster technically, you know? Got me thinking at the time, like, is this line like on its way out? Is everything okay? But nah, everything's fine. You know what, it's probably just the pandemic slowing things down. I'm sure we're gonna hit the ground running in 2021. As we were headed into 2021, I was wondering what we'd end up seeing from that new Ultimate MK3 body mold. Would we finally get our accurate Ermac and Rain? Maybe they'd do another Human Smoke, since the original one had that darker color scheme, which I mentioned was an issue that I also had with the original Sub-Zero. Surely a newer version of Smoke would give him the correct light gray costume. Did we get any of these? No, hell no. Know what we did get? Another Sub-Zero. Granted, I was not mad at this. This was the original Mortal Kombat 3 Sub-Zero, which showed Kuai Liang in his post-Lin Kuei attire. See, in the story, the Lin Kuei was turning his members into cyborgs, but Sub-Zero wasn't having any part of that, so he bailed on him. In so doing, he stopped wearing their uniform. I like this figure a lot, and despite being just another version of Sub-Zero, at least it was a brand new figure. Thankfully, the other releases in 2021 were sorely needed new characters. We got Kung Lao, specifically the Mortal Kombat 2 version. It was great to finally see him. I always appreciated filling out the ranks for the original games, and any new character was welcome. They also did end up doing a bloody variant for Kung Lao, but this time they painted the lower body to look closer to his Mortal Kombat 3 costume. Which I always wondered, why not just make an MK3 version? But alas, it was good reuse for a mold they already had, and it was easy enough for them to do it, and it was easy for me to pass, since I was ready to just wait around for a standard, true Mortal Kombat 3 version of Kung Lao. We also saw something that I never expected. Storm gave us a beautiful figure of Motaro, the sub-boss from Mortal Kombat 3. This is a glorious figure, and everything about it is damn near perfect. The bendy wire in the tail for posing, the articulated bloody skeleton he came with as an accessory, the immense stature and sculpt details. Man, I love Motaro. Figure of the year for 2021, hands down. The character himself in the lore of the games has had a pretty rough existence. So yeah, this action figure is the most respect that Motaro's been shown in 25 years. So at this point, it did seem like the line had kind of like stepped up a little bit. We're starting to see signs of improvement, you know? We got 2 brand new characters, plus the third figure is at least, even if it's the same character, it's a brand new look for that character. So, I mean, I'll take it. Everything's looking pretty good right now. It seems like we got ourselves on a good little stride as we're leaving 2021. As we enter 2022, what kind of surprises could there be? Very few, it would turn out. One was a repaint, Reptile, on the ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 body. And to be fair, this figure is very nice, and the accessories and alternate head were great inclusions. Plus, as I mentioned before, the quality of life improvements over the original Ninja body mold made this a much better figure overall, quality-wise. And sure, I still like the look of the older figure, but like I said earlier, this style of engineering is going to hold up much better over the years. Like, look at this. The other? Aw man, let's talk about Kentaro. He's got everything that I loved about Goro, except with huge improvements in the ankle range. A gigantic release for a brand new fan favorite character, which would also end up getting a bloody variant. And yeah, this was the only brand new figure we got in 2022, but at least it was a really great one. But at this point, it kind of started seeming like maybe the writing's on the wall, you know, only 2 new releases for the year, and one of them is just a repaint of a previous figure. And again, I need to reiterate, I'm not mad at the fact that they keep re-releasing the repaints of these ninjas. That's what the characters look like. So they are releasing game-accurate figures, which, I mean, is not the problem here. The problem for me is that I thought the plan was to release those repaints to fund the other characters that they needed to develop the tooling for and spend all the money on the production, all that kind of stuff. So they're just doing repaint after repaint, and we're seeing very little else to show for it. Plus, in 2022, they kind of pivoted a little bit, and they started doing 1/6 scale figures. So like the 12-inch ones, they're back to doing that. And they did a couple cool like Scorpion and Sub-Zero figures. I think there was a Noob Saibot in there. But I don't really collect that scale of figures. I just wanted my standard size figures. So now I'm like, well, I hope they don't just like pivot and do only that scale figures, because I just want them to keep paying attention to the smaller ones, the ones I like, you know, because I'm selfish and I love this line. So yeah, limited releases in 2022 kind of discouraged me. I kind of started thinking like, are we like doing okay here? Are we wrapping things up? What's going on? 2023 would prove to also release only 2 characters in the line, but at least they were brand new characters, brand new figures altogether, and they were long-awaited fan favorite characters, and I think everybody was happy about these. First up, we got Liu Kang. At long last, 7 years into the life of the line, we finally got the main character, the Chosen One.
The Chosen One.
Not that guy. Once I got Liu Kang in hand, I was immediately blown away. The detailing they did on the sculpt, the slimmer and more realistic looking body proportions, and the accessories. My god, the accessories. After ending 2022 with a brand new Kentaro and leading off 2023 with Liu Kang, it was like this line was turning a corner. The issues with some of the proportions looked like they were being addressed, and the figure being as incredible as it was made this feel like a rejuvenation for the line. He came with his dragon fatality, which I would have thought was going to be a static piece, but Storm went the extra mile and made it a complete figure. It has great paintwork and surprisingly decent articulation. Nothing amazing, but it's enough to get some poses out of. For my money, I think Liu Kang was the best figure in the line, and he would end up being the highlight of the entire series. Not long afterward, we got Kano, another much-needed figure with lots of different head sculpts and his signature knives that he used in the games. And while this figure seemed to take a little step backward in terms of the proportions being similar to some of the stockier figures from yesteryear, the overall release was great. Kano, just like Liu Kang, was based on his Mortal Kombat 3 look. Big Bad Toy Store did exclusive versions of both of these characters, with Kano swapping out the red for blue, and Liu Kang wearing black and orange instead of the black and red from the standard figure. And while Liu Kang's added fire effects and the flaming dragon looked amazing, I skipped on both of these exclusives. I mean, they would have got me if these figures were painted to be more similar to their first appearances from the original game, with Kano in white and Liu Kang in all black, but I'm sure we'd get to those versions eventually. So 2 brand new figures, both of them really good, and long-awaited figures that we've needed in the line for quite a while at this point. Now, I didn't love the fact that it seemed like we were slowing down to only getting 2 new figures a year, but at least it was something. At least it had been somewhat consistent, I guess. So I wasn't stressing, even though the line had slowed down, I was still collecting, I was still happy with the figures that were coming out, so I'll take what I can get. Plus, I have all my pre-orders open for Big Bad Toy Store for the next year, 2024. So there's some good stuff coming down the pipeline for me. I'm just excited about it. Let's see what 2024 brings.
It's official. You suck.
And now comes the part where we got to talk about 2024. which is a real monkey's paw situation because it ended up being one of the best years for the line in terms of the variety of characters and the quality of figures that we got, but it was also the last year of the line's existence. So if you're not familiar with how kind of modern toy collecting works, in particular with figures like these, basically they'll solicit pre-orders like months in advance or sometimes even like a year in advance or longer, and you'll lock in your pre-order, and when the figure does eventually make it to the United States, your order will be fulfilled and everything's grand. So in other words, by the time you had a figure that was sent to you and you had it in hand, you probably had one or two other figures on pre-order going into the following year or the next few months or whatever the case. So there's a lot of overlap in the timeline here. There's figures that are still being produced and still coming out at this time, but it's also kind of coinciding with some bad news that we're going to talk about here for the line in a few minutes. Basically, I had pre-ordered all the rest of these figures that we're going to talk about sometime in 2023, and in early 2024, they had started hitting my Big Bad Toy Store pile of loot. And so I got together a nice pile of loot and had that sent. So in February of 2024, I shipped the pile of loot, and in that, package, there was 2 Mortal Kombat figures. There was Nightwolf and a brand new Shao Kahn. Nightwolf is everything I needed from this character. He has all the heads and hands you'd want, and includes several of the effect parts from his original moveset from Mortal Kombat 3. Physical and energy tomahawks, his bow and arrow, a sick lightning bolt. He's a great release, even though I feel that he's a little on the larger side. But, scaling in this line's been all over the place for years, so, whatever. The standout here, though, the new Shao Kahn. This release basically took everything that worked from the original figure and perfected it. You want hands and heads? You got them. Hammer? Yeah, but why not add some spears, too? A throne? Making the original throne look like a lawn chair. Look at the size of this thing, with the chains, the skulls, it's so frickin' metal. But what about the figure? The figure is somehow also even better than the previous one. And I'm sure there's still plenty of people who love the original version more than the new one simply because the first release is from the classic games, while the new one is based on the rebooted continuity from Mortal Kombat 9. But purely as a figure, this one holds up way better than the original. The engineering, the detail, the body proportions, they're all just better in my opinion. And while I do prefer the character design from the original games, it's similar enough to stand in with the classic characters. If you're a collector who missed the original release, I wouldn't even sweat trying to track that one down if this new one's available to you. And I'll end up saying that again for the next figure we talk about, but first, we need to address some distressing news that was circulating around the time that I got these 2 figures in my hands. People were really starting to talk about Storm Collectibles losing their Mortal Kombat license. So at first I thought this was just internet nonsense, By 2024, we were already well into the era of internet clickbait on YouTube and sensationalism about videos that say like, oh, is this line cooked or is this figure line done and all this stuff. Very rarely I find is any of that stuff true. It's usually just rage baiting to, bring engagement to the channel or the video or whatever. So I kind of just leave that stuff alone. It's not really my thing. But in this case, unfortunately, it happened to be correct. Little by little, people started talking more and more, and the clues started kind of adding up. And one day, it started getting reported that Storm Collectibles' own website, under the licenses page, where it shows all of the licenses they have, Mortal Kombat was just not there anymore. So this is where I started getting a little panicked. Now remember, this is my favorite action figure line to collect, and there's been no word from Storm Collectibles at all, because like I said before, Storm is notoriously just pretty bad at communicating things with the people who collect their lines. Like I said, you might get a few teasers here and there, and maybe a pre-order window, but that's it. They don't tell you what's going on. So yeah, my favorite line, just, is it wrapping up? Is it done? Or, I was blindsided, and I think a lot of other collectors were caught off guard too, so I'm like, okay, what the hell? As near as I can figure, this is all speculative, but I think Warner Brothers was doing some things with the license. They were shifting a few things around, and that included all the merchandising rights. Now, for anyone keeping track, McFarlane Toys at this time was also doing figures based on Mortal Kombat. In this case, they were doing the Mortal Kombat 11 designs. Now, that line seemed like it wrapped up around the same time as Storm Collectibles line did. Now, at the time, it seemed like that line had kind of just run its course. MK11 had been out for a couple of years already, and McFarlane Toys just started kind of releasing figures based on guest characters more than the actual characters in Mortal Kombat. You had your choice of like 25 different Spawn variants from the game, but they just weren't doing actual Mortal Kombat figures. You could go buy a Joker in a Mortal Kombat box or a Batman Who Laughs. Like, those probably would have been cool in the DC Multiverse line, but this is just not really what I think of when I think of Mortal Kombat. So to me, that's kind of why that line wrapped up, but for all I know, maybe it had something to do with this Warner Brothers thing too, if that was indeed what was happening. The point I'm making is this: we went from getting the Storm line and the McFarlane line to getting nothing. like no figures were being produced for the foreseeable future as far as anybody could tell. What I was hearing at the time, and this is all speculation again, and this is from other collectors that I talked to around that time and just people that were, close to this, Warner Brothers was trying to push for their newest game, Mortal Kombat 1. Not this Mortal Kombat 1, we're talking about this Mortal Kombat 1 now. And again, yeah, it's dumb. I hate it. Now, like I said, I have no proof of this. It's just kind of what people were speculating, and without anybody giving us a definitive statement on this from Storm or Warner Brothers or anybody, we just don't really know. And if there has been a statement, I completely missed it. But I gotta believe that Warner Brothers probably picked up on the fact that people weren't really responding to Mortal Kombat 1, the newest game, in the same way that they had to previous games. Like the player base didn't really seem to be there, and critical response wasn't really what they were hoping for, I guess. So maybe in a weird twisted move, they thought that eliminating everything else Mortal Kombat and just focusing on specifically this game was going to direct people's attention straight to that. Like anybody who was into the figure lines might just be like, okay, well now let's pay attention to the only Mortal Kombat we have. Which seems like a bad business move to me. Like, so if I'm Warner Brothers, right, and I have two separate companies selling figures based on the property that I own, I'm getting money for those sales, And so for me to just cut those off, I'm now getting nothing from any of that. So it just seems like bad business, but I don't know. What do I know? They didn't ask me for my opinion when they did all this. Long story short, Storm Collectibles now no longer has the rights to make any Mortal Kombat figures. It seemed like the only ones we were going to get from this point on were the ones that I already had on pre-order, which would have been MKX Goro and MK3 Shiva. And after that, looks like we're just wrapping things up. Goro, for what it's worth, is an excellent figure. And this improves basically everything about the first Goro from 2018, including those annoying ankle joints. Again, I would wholeheartedly recommend this figure over the previous version, unless you're a real stickler from the classic look. And even then, this one's armor and clothing pieces can mostly be removed or swapped, so it wouldn't be hard to customize this into a classic Goro if you really wanted to. The detailing on this one is killer too. I recognize that it's designed to look like a much later game, so stylistically it might look different from the rest of the line, but I don't mind that. It's a great figure. Lastly, for the final figure in the line, we got Shiva. Another Shokan, and ironically, the first and last female character in the line. As a figure, she does everything you'd want her to do. The posing options are great. She's enormous, and looks properly imposing when you put her up against standard-sized figures. Her slimmer proportions make her articulation work very nicely, and the extra accessories are always nice to have. At the time of this writing, this is the final figure in the line. What a way to go. So I got Shiva in May of 2024, and it is now, as I record this, July of 2025, and there has, to my knowledge, been no word, no talks about Storm picking up where they left off, no talks about negotiating a new contract for them to make more Mortal Kombat figures. I think it's a wrap. Hi, it's me again, McKay. I'm interrupting myself. Forgive me. So more distressing news. I was going back through some social media stuff, like trying to find pictures of prototypes and product shots and solicits and all this kind of stuff. And it seems that the Storm Collectibles Instagram account has basically completely scrubbed everything to do with Mortal Kombat. Like, I went way back to the beginning of like their Street Fighter line, because MK and Street Fighter were coming out around the same time with their first few releases. And I'm seeing all the Street Fighter stuff, but I'm seeing none of the Mortal Kombat. So yeah, I think we're done. Storm is still out there making lots of great stuff, but it's just thinking about what could have been. All the empty spaces on my shelf that should be filled with figures from Storm Collectibles, like the ones they showed. So I don't know if anything's changed with Warner Brothers or any of that kind of thing, but I will tell you that McFarlane Toys has a license to make classic Mortal Kombat figures now. At the time of this video, they've showcased some of their stuff that's going to be coming out eventually, so maybe something will happen with Storm too. I mean, I don't want to get my hopes up, but I suppose it's possible. As for the McFarlane classic stuff coming out, I'll probably pick them up. If it's anything like their Mortal Kombat 11 line, it'll probably be pretty hit and miss, honestly. There was a lot of pretty lackluster figures in the Mortal Kombat 11 series, although I am prepared to admit that there were also a couple of genuinely really good figures in that line too. So I'm hoping we see more of the latter. And as for the stuff we never got from Storm Collectibles, well, I've prepared a eulogy for all those figures that were never produced. And yeah, it's gonna get really emotional, alright? So grab some tissues, because I need you to understand the profound sadness that I feel knowing that we could have had all these figures and we just never got them. Roll it. And so as I record this, again, July 2025, that's kind of where we stand, you know? Mortal Kombat as a property seems like it's kind of in flux at the moment. The last game and the DLC kind of just bombed. Like, didn't seem like people were into it. Didn't seem like people really enjoyed it. For what it's worth, I had fun with it, but like, I don't know. It didn't hold my interest for nearly as long as the previous game or any of the ones that had come before that. I didn't even play the DLC. Like, I'll probably get around to it at some point, but man, I don't know. As for Storm Collectibles, like I mentioned earlier, they're still out there doing lots of figures. They're doing great stuff with their Street Fighter figures. They've got like a bunch of other fighting game licenses and some other odds and ends here and there, as well as a brand new series called Storm Arena, which is just a smaller scale version of what they normally do. And by all accounts, collectors seem to love that. So Storm Collectibles seemingly doing fine. And in one bit of positive news, I can say as we wrap things up here, as one door closes, another door opens. Storm Collectibles, I'm not going to get any more Mortal Kombat stuff from them, but I am going to get Final Fight. I'm super excited, super stoked, and it looks like the prototypes are pretty far along. Like, hopefully they're like in production, and I'm just very excited to see what we get when we get those prototypes that turn into the final figures in our hand. No. These Final Fight figures, they're coming out. They better freaking come out. Storm, don't you do this to me again. Thank you so much for watching this. I know it's a lot. I know it's difficult to go through the entire lifespan of an action figure series. I just wanted to share my love of this line with anybody who chose to put this video on, so I thank you. If you got to this part of the video, please leave a like, leave a comment, share it, you know, do whatever you got to do, all that stuff that YouTube people have to beg you for to keep this video relevant for as long as I can. I also got a Patreon, all these fine people on there. They might have even seen this video before you did because, you know, early stuff goes on Patreon as well as a bunch of work in progress stuff. We got dioramas, we got stop motion animation, we got exclusive stuff over there. So if you'd like to hang out with these lovely people, please consider it. My name is Captain McKay, and we'll catch you in the next one. Later on.
That's crispy.